Hello, statistics students. This is Mr. Gazzato, and today's lesson is about conditional probability. So this video is going to review the main ideas. So if you look at problem number 1, we have a table that surveys 91 people. So I'm going to highlight that 91. And some of them like knitting, some of them like sewing, some of them do not like sewing, some of them do not like knitting. So in the previous lessons, we were always using that total of 91. In conditional probability, we're only going to look at a row or we're going to look at a column. So part A says, what is the probability that a person likes sewing given they like knitting? So the given or the condition is they like knitting. So I'm going to highlight the knitting row. So for part A of the problem, I'm only focusing on that row. So in the blue highlighted row, how many of them like sewing? Only 30 of them. So for part A, I would do 30 out of 58. And when I do that on my calculator, it's 0.51724. And then if I write that as a percent, 51.72%. Let's take a look at part B. So part B says, what is the probability that a person likes knitting given they like sewing? So in this particular part, I'm only interested in the people that like sewing, which is this column. So for part B of the problem, I'm only looking at the people that like sewing, and there's a total of 47 of them. And then in green, how many of those like knitting? It's these 30 people. So for part B, it's 30 out of 47, which is approximately 63829, so 63.83%. Let's take a look at part C. For part C, I want to know the probability that the person does not like sewing given they like knitting. So the condition is they like knitting, so I'm going to highlight this knitting row. And from that knitting row, in green, how many of those people do not like sewing? It's this 28 that I am circling. So for part C of the problem, 28 people out of 58 is the answer to part C. Again, I'm only using that row. When I do that on my calculator, I get 0.48275. And if I were to round to 2 decimal places as a percent, 48.28%. Let's take a look at part D. Part D says, what is the probability that a person does not like knitting given they do not like sewing? So the condition is they do not like sewing. So I'm looking at this column. And in that column, how many of them do not like knitting? It's these 16 people that I just circled. So for part D, what is the probability that a person does not like knitting given they do not like sewing? It's 16 out of the total 44. When I do that on my calculator, I get 0.36363. If I were to make that a decimal, or excuse me, a percent, 36.36%. So the main idea of conditional probability is you're only looking at a row or you're only looking at a column. So I'm going to do another example. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. It's my suggestion that maybe you pause the screen right now or pause the video and you try these problems on your own. After you do the problems, maybe you come back and watch the video and see how well you did. So for part A, we want to know the probability that the person likes math given they like science. So the condition is they like science. So when I look at they like science, it is this row. How many people like science? 29. And then in yellow, the probability that the person likes math, well, who likes math? Everybody. But in this particular example, it is 14 people out of that 29. So when you do that, you get approximately 0.48275, which is 48.28%. Go ahead and part B. Let's see if you got that one right. So part B, what is the probability that the person likes science given they like math? So here I'm only going to use this column. And in that column, I want to know, of those people that like math, how many also like science? So I'm going to circle the 14 people here like science. So it's 14 out of the 31 people that like math. And doing part B on the calculator, I get approximately 0.45161, which is 45.16%. Let's see how you did on part C. Part C says, what is the probability the person does not like math given they like science? So if they like science, I'm only looking at that row. The condition is they like science, so I only look at that row. And in that row, how many people do not like math? 15. So the conditional probability for part C is 15 out of 29. When you do that on your calculator, you get 0.51724, which is 51.72%. And let's do one more. Letter D. What is the probability the person does not like science given they do not like math? So the condition is they do not like math. So I'm going to highlight this column, do not like math. And of the people that do not like math, what is the probability that they do not like science? So in that blue highlighted column, how many people do not like science? 27. So the answer to part D would be 27 people out of the 42. And doing that on my calculator, I get approximately 0.64286, which is around 64.29%. Okay. If you would like to try one more problem, I'm going to show you another problem on the screen. And when I look at that problem on the screen, I'm actually not going to go through the whole work, but you can see if you get the correct answers. All right, so problem number 3. Go ahead and pause the screen and try these problems, and then I'm going to write down the answers to see how you did. If you have questions on these, just ask me one day in class or make an appointment, and we'll go over them. Part A, 53.33%. Part B, 38.10%. Part C, 46.67%. And Part D, 63.16%. So the goal again was to talk about conditional probability. You're either using a row or a column instead of the overall total. So I hope you found this video helpful.